Good morning. Let me see if I can get situated here. Um, so this is a player reflections and recap of last night's session 44 of the Chronicles of Joth Blackfish Bay campaigns. I think I finally figured out what this is called. We titled this um, kind of a twist on terms, release the Kraken, right? The famous line, release the Kraken. To catch the Kraken, as we had intended with Martin, my thief, John, Justin, set out, Dale, if you could have made it, David, to set out and try to capture a bandit leader known as the Kraken. And the goal, of course, developed in a couple of sessions ago when our fearless Jacotus, our what do you call them? Sponsor? No, our anyway, the guy we work for, okay, for lack of a better term, I can't think of the word right now, asked us to free one of his henchmen, his you know, uh Hilda, right? And George had met Hilda in many sessions ago, and he was smitten by Hilda. So George instantly, when he heard she was imprisoned and was going to be sent to the trial pits of Joth, where she would most likely perish at the hands of some ogre or something in an arena. Um, of course, we agreed to do it because we're going to get paid to do it and because it's the thing. But Martin, over the course of our travels in that day or so, and then meeting George, and talking to George, Martin wants to effectively do it for ultimately. I'm the thief with the golden heart. I want to effectively help George save the woman he loves. Well, we didn't have enough people show up last night, so I switched to my first level dwarf Unger Roth, which was perfect because Eloy joined us for the first time ever, and that was amazing, fantastic. And he, of course, is playing a first level human fighter named Osric, and we were the only two at that point. So we decided, well, let's go with two new characters, kind of doing the same thing, out looking for this guy that has a bounty on his head. There can be more than one group of people looking to capture this bandit. But of course, Unger Roth and Osric have a different goal. That is to capture him and get paid. So we're hunting him for the bounty. And fortunately, John was able to make it. Of course, he unfortunately was late. He had other things he had to attend to, but of course, this is what I love about old D20, old open sandbox, open world, dungeon crawling. Again, literal drop in, drop out. There's no reason we can't make it work. Obviously, very dangerous, depending on the style of level of dungeon crawl or style, right? When you don't have bodies. So I effectively thought, well, we're probably going to run into just some wandering monster that may waylay both of us first level fighters. So I went into last night's session when I realized it was going to be just Eloy and I, that Unger Roth has seen he has seen his last session. He has seen his. I have had too many characters perish in the wilderness of Joth and Blackfish Bay, um, to not know better that I'm going to have to enjoy Unger Roth for whatever time I have. Okay, yeah, fantastic. And again, Todd, with masterful skill, uh, topsy turvy, what he had thought. I'm not saying planned because he already has a map and he already has, stuff. So it isn't like he had to prepare a session for us. But you certainly, as a GM, always go in with the idea, okay, it's going to be Martin. It's going to be the group who last time we left off, they were headed, northeast. So as a GM, you just always somewhat prepared that way. That okay, this group of people is doing this thing. It's just easier to handle when there's continuity. So when all of a sudden it's two new character, not new. I mean, Unger Ross had a session under his belt, but two new characters coming together Eloy for the first time in this world, right? So he's not only playing with us for the first time as a player in a long time, but he's coming into a world that's existed for Todd for years and years and years in his local games and online sessions, and of course 4 years for just our group through myriads of chronicles. As Todd pointed out, this is like the fourth series of chronicles out of all these campaigns. This Blackfish Bay Chronicles, so to speak. And matter of fact, I don't even guess you could call these Joth games. Joth is just the main city. I'm sure you could call this, some epic world or something. I don't know, but it's become known as Joth, which is what happens. These things take on an identity of their own through the groups that play them, right? Um, so of course, he has to quickly come up with where are you guys at? What are you doing? And why are you doing it? To make just to get us on the ground, so we're not floundering around, banging around without anything to do. And he handled it perfectly and quickly, and we're going. I mean, within a few minutes, we are hiking toward the East Woods from Brickett's Bottom, which is the small halfling village where the new portal is, right? So this tiny little halfling village is now more than that, because there is an actual portal that allows big city people or people from all over from other portals to come through this tiny little village. So you can imagine Brickett's Bottom's 8 or 10 buildings is going to end up being a giant metropolis at some point in the future, right? It's like a train depot. It's a little 2-horse town until the train comes through. Then it becomes an 8-house town, right? Or an 8-horse town, or whatever, right? So it's like Route 66. When the portals dry up, these towns will dry up, right? Okay. So it's just I can't get enough of this stuff. There is no story. We only make sense of the events, and the event and making sense of the events becomes the story, the description, the narrative that we tell. And I just love it, right? Okay. All our lives are a series of events told in chronological order, which becomes the story of us, or the story of me, or the story of Bill, or whatever, or the story of, Mexico or whatever, right? It's just it's a series of events in chronological order, right? Okay. So, and it's deep winter. And so we've had a blizzard over the last few days, and we're moving through about 9 or 10 inches of snow, went off-road, and we travel to a place that's known on the map as Good Night's Rest, which is a dilapidated old ruined inn called the Good Night's Rest, but it's K at night, spelled with a K. And so we stay there and we build a fire. We purposely create smoke, hoping to draw bandits to us. We're hoping that somewhere along this road he might actually strike. So we actually we make bait of ourselves, and we hide in these ruins, and we take shifts, and we're not interrupted at all in the night by anything. And so the next morning we continue on to the East Woods, and we are working our way along the road, paralleling the road. We don't want to be on the road. We don't want to make ourselves obvious victims, but we wanted to parallel the road looking for signs of the bandits, which we know are led by the Kraken, right? And so along this path, we eventually come to another footpath that winds off into the East Woods. And this is our best chance, as this is a footpath. And so we follow this again, same thing. We parallel it about 20 feet away in the woods, in the deep woods. We don't get on the path, we parallel the path. And we come to an open clearing. And this open clearing is littered with scarecrow, propped up horses, and propped up bones with hides, all like scarecrows. It's almost like a clearing to ward off or scare off people. We investigate this, and then while investigating this, John shows up, and George literally, Todd just has George stumble out of the woods, hair a mess, as if he's gotten somehow separated from Martin and the rest of the party that we would have been running with. Comes stumbling through the woods as if he's been separated and lost from his crew. And there is no explanation. We don't need it. George is here. And so we meet George. We have a great interplay, and we agree that just in passing conversation that we're all on the same path. We all want the Kraken. We want the Kraken for the bounty, and George wants the Kraken to trade for Hilda. And we agree we're going to work together to get the Kraken. However, we expect, Osric and I expect to be paid our portion of the bounty. We'll let him have her or have the Kraken to get her, but we expect to get paid our share of the bounty, which would be 1/3. If we do this with him, it would be 1/3 share each, right? So, and he agrees he'll attempt to do that. So 3 is better than 2. And so we, while standing here having this conversation, though, amidst this garden of scarecrows is the best way I can put it, we hear bellowing and screaming, and up one of the paths, one of the more difficult paths, as Todd has marked this particular path as a red line on the map, meaning it's a difficult terrain to traverse. We're on a yellow path, and we're in a clearing, and we hear this bellow up that path, and we glance and we see this giant, literal 12-foot giant storming down the path, but he is making chase. He is actually chasing 2 what appear to be humans. And so I scramble up a tree. Osric hides behind a tree, draws a bow, and sets aim. And George hides himself. And this creature passes us, chasing 2 humans, and they come through the clearing, and they race over and they pull from a thicket, a hidden a bundle of thickets that hide a passage through thickets, and they disappear into that and pull it shut. And the giant comes storming through, waylays much of the area, and then in confusion chooses to head toward the road, and the giant heads off. And as the giant is heading now toward the road on the trail we came in on, we quickly scramble across this clearing, pull the thicket door loose, get into the thickets, close it up behind us, and we begin to follow these 2 humans through the thickets. And we make way. We actually spot their feet. We spot their tracks in the ground, and we were able to avoid some traps along the way. So we wiggle past some traps where they clearly had created this thicket tunnel through old, gnarly, very thick thicket. So it's almost like a tunnel of thicket. And we work our way through this. We come into a clearing in which we see is green. It's got mushrooms there, and we see a stump, and in that stump is being born an elf child from a stump. It's an elf birth sac surrounded by these mushrooms. And the bard recognizes this and tells us this. He makes a lore check. So again, the bard has a lore ability. 1 and 2, he would know some of these stories, the magic, etc. So it's perfect. He rolled a 2, and he gets this information. He gives it to us, and of course, as Eloy Osric says, I am the Fae or something. I am not going to partake in. So Eloy backs away as Osric, and of course I follow suit as I'm a dwarf. I'm like, yeah, exactly what I thought. Elves were born from stumps, so I make some remarks that of course elves are born from stumps. That's exactly what they would be. And we all move away and follow the trail, continue on. So we avoid this potential, you don't want to mess with any offsprings young. So we're not going to be caught messing around with an elf birth sac, right? So we make our way, and it isn't long before we come to another clearing, and we hear tweets of birds above us in the trees. However, it doesn't sound quite like birds. So our bard launches a crossbow bolt into the trees above us, and no birds fly away. But the tweeting stops. And then I don't know if it was I or Osric said something to above us, and we get a response from gruff humans hiding in the trees above us, and they basically ask us some questions, and we tell them we're looking for the Kraken and we want to parlay with the Kraken. We're not, it says if you continue in that direction, you're going to fall into the hands of the Kraken, and we're like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what we want to find. We want to talk to the Kraken. And so the voices say, well, then go ahead on then, be about your business. We make our way down the trail here, and we all discuss, are these elves tricking us? Are these actual humans? Well, we don't know. but we have no choice. We've got to keep going. So as we continue to head on this trail, we hear behind us the bellows and the screams of the giant again, and we can hear him crushing and waylaying trees and probably the thicket behind us. So we increase our pace to make sure that we don't get in the path of this giant, and we stumble into a clearing out of the thicket, an old cabin with a wood pile and some refuge in the area around the cabin. And immediately Osric takes cover behind the woodpile as he anticipates this giant is literally behind us, tracking or just randomly running. So he takes cover. George very quietly just follows me, and I go right into the cabin. I immediately grab the bow, and he says, as you come in, there's a bow and there's a gun. I say, I grab it. And then he says, you see this body on the floor, and I run over to the body and I bang it with my mace to see if it's alive or dead. And it turns out to be some kind of fungus that's grown through the skeleton of a dead person who has a silver breastplate. And I'm definitely interested in this breastplate. But as I bump it, I trigger spores which spew from it. And I fail my saving throw. And of course, I'm affected by it. We don't know long term what that means, or even if there is a long term effect. So I'm coughing and spluttering and hacking. And George from the doorway of the cabin is watching me do this as the giant erupts from the thicket into the cabin clearing and spots Osric. And so you can imagine George is watching this clumsy dwarf who's now gagging and choking on spores, from the doorway, and then behind him sees this giant as John deftly describes it. It's like he turns his head and there's this giant comes bursting through. And the giant catches the gleam of the helmet of Osric hiding behind the woodpile and waylays the woodpile. Misses Osric, but waylays the woodpile. And Osric ends up in a melee with a 12-foot giant. And George and I stumble out and engage in a melee. And George takes shots at it with his crossbow. And we had, again, I talked about this before. You don't play heroes. Heroic things happen because of decisions, but because of dice. And again, we play to find out, right? There's no story here. There's no narrative want to be heroes. We play. And the dice, the decisions we make and what the fate of the dice dictate whether there's heroic things. And I've been playing Joth for 4 years. I've seen probably 20 characters die. I've seen some characters die in the first 5 minutes. This is the joy of D20. They all have a story, whether it lasted 5 minutes or it lasted 4 sessions. And I witnessed last night Eloy in one of the most heroic melee combats with a creature that quite literally would have killed him. So we're using roll 20, so the dice drop and we all see it, right? And he rolls a 19 and 6 points of damage, and he dodges the giant, misses him. And then he rolls a 18 and 9 points of damage, and the giant misses him. And then he rolls a, whatever. So he ends up, I don't know, he must have taken so much damage because it led to morale checks. And of course, my character is so narratively, my character misses every attempt on the giant. But I describe how I'm trying to hit his big toe and I'm trying to hit his small toe. So you can imagine this giant is trying to keep his foot off the ground so I don't crush his toes with my mace. And meanwhile, it's making it easier for Eloy to hit. I mean, Eloy's rolling all the hit numbers. I mean, there's no modifiers here, but you can just see this little dwarf, harassing the giant while Osric is just waylaying it. And George is putting crossbow bolts into it, An epic fight with a giant. And Osric hits it, I think, 4 times, doing it, I think, on average, I want to say 7 points of damage. And he rolls an 11, I think. Well, first before he ever engages it, he yells at it, "Get out of here. You don't want to mess with me." And I mean, I'm not kidding you. Eloy stands up after the woodpile is decimated and says, "Go away. You don't want to mess with me. I am Osric, the whatever." And he rolls a reaction check, modified -2. This giant's like, "Who are you?" And of course, fails miserably, and the giant, comes after him. And they end up in a melee. So he tries to kind of tell it, "Go away," and then just proceeds to kick its ass. When I say kick its ass, I mean it was the most legendary fight for a first level fighter that I have ever seen, probably in any D20 old school game in my life. And I have been GMing hundreds, almost 1,000 sessions. Never seen anything like it. He waylays this thing. Anyway, after it's hit, 4 times, 5 times, and suffered damage, he makes the morale check and rolls an 11. And this thing says, "I've had enough," and it races off away into the and as good measure, George levels his final shot and shoots it in the back with another bolt on its way out. And we didn't kill it, but holy cow! And that is Vanquish, right? You don't have to kill. You just got to win it. So again, there is XP credit here. You do not have to kill it. You just have to defeat it or survive it. And he did, and we did, I guess, but he did. And it was epic. Meanwhile, my dwarf is, you can imagine my beard is full of spores of this. I'm disheveled. I've got spores in my hair and my beard. I have not been able to even touch this giant with my mace. And Osric looks like and meanwhile, the first thing, I say to him is my character. I looks like I picked a good partner in Brickett's Bottom. It is fortunate we found each other. So that's a legend. I mean, that's a legend. Anyway, I tell them, listen, there is a silver breastplate on this dead creature, but unfortunately surrounded by a plant beast that spews spores. And we agree, let's burn it to the ground. We can burn it to the ground and then retrieve it. So I use all my oil, I light a torch, and we set it ablaze. And of course, it's going to burn for a long time and it's creating smoke. We decide, well, we're going to come back later. Let's continue on looking for the Kraken. So we move on through the thicket. Of course, this cabin burning in the middle of this opening. And we get back into the thicket and we continue on. And again, we're not in the thicket now. We're on a trail outside the thicket. So now we're free again to parallel the trail from 15 or 20 feet in the thick woods without being forced to be in this like tunnel of thicket. And we sure enough hear voices. We come along and we see 10 men, 5 of which stay at a camp with bows, etc., and 5 of which take off on the trail we were paralleling back toward the cabin. And we realize, oh, they've seen the smoke. They've seen the smoke of the cabin burning. And George definitely says, I want to count the hands of the 5 men. And because 5 men should have 10 hands, and he counts 9 and notices there's something about one of them that doesn't look right. It's not a hand. And George says, there he is, the Kraken. So we parallel them in the woods and we ambush them. And again, Eloy and George both just waylay these guys. Eloy, I've never seen that many good rolls. I mean, if we played 5 sessions in a row with 5 guys, you're just not going to see that many good rolls. And again, it's roll 20, so the dice are dropping. We're seeing them, and it is the most amazing night. I would say beginner's luck, but Eloy's been playing for 40 something years, like we all have, so it ain't beginner's luck. Anyway, it was epic, and we waylay these guys. And between George, I mean, my character is utterly so for every amazing thing Eloy's character achieved last night, my dwarf was the antithesis. So if he rolled a 19, I rolled a 2. If he rolled an 18, I rolled a 4. If he rolled a 16, I rolled a 1. Literally, I could do nothing. And Eloy, it was amazing. And George. So George and he waylay this party, and they bring the Kraken to his knees. We tie up the Kraken, and we actually capture another bandit. And we pay him. George actually offers to pay him and release him if he'll just guide us out. Well, he fails 2 reaction checks. This guy's a stubborn SOB. And my character at this point is like, dude, we have got you captive. We could drag you back and put you into give you the custody of you to. But George has already said, no, just show us a way out. We'll give you your freedom. So my character's thinking, no, you SOB, you're a stubborn SOB. We're taking you back. Well, I wasn't going to leave him to go run off and tell the other bandits. So we tied him up and we left him there in the snow because he would not lead us out. And we took off toward where we knew the direction of the road was. And leaving the cabin burning, we weren't going to go back at that point to try to retrieve this. We got the Kraken and we've avoided these other bandits. We don't have time, and we're beat up. I mean, my character's down to 2 hit points. I don't think Eloy was ever hit. On top of everything, the giant, because the giant does 2d8 damage or something. So the giant missed him 3 or 4 times. I mean, it's just one hit probably would have killed Osric. It should have killed Osric dead. It is epic. And the dice, the actions, the circumstances. A giant has entered the play. We did not successfully flee. We roll initiative. The circumstances are we have no choice. We're in a melee with a giant, or he's in a melee with a giant. He attempts to parlay, fails. We're in a melee. So it's roll initiative. We're in a melee with a giant. That's circumstances. Actions are I'm going to fight it. Actions are I do what I got to do. And then the dice dictate the fate of these characters. And the fate is heroic. It's legendary. And it was witnessed by myself. And you can imagine I'm going to be tagging along, telling stories of, this is the giant slayer, right? Or whatever. Amazing. And George witnessed it, the bard. So I said, you must write a tale about this. You must sing a song of this. And George's like, yeah, I'll think about it. I'll figure it out, right? And I said, I don't know how well it'll go with the lyre, right? You need like violin, dramatic violin for this story, right? The lyre, So anyway, it was just epic. And I do wish we had had our full entourage. I wish we would have had Justin and David and Dell, because these sessions with 4, 5, 6 people are just, they're glorious. And with 2 or 3, it's not about role playing. Eloy and I role played the entire night. And there's trepidation, right? Eloy and I both knew we're not going to survive tonight. I mean, I've made a character, and you kind of know that with 6 players, that the odds that you're going to be one of the 3 that died tonight are pretty good. But we just went into that with some serious trepidation. I went in going, I don't know what's going to happen, but it is not going to go well. And that's okay. But when you have a party of 6 or so, you really do engage, right? You really do engage in the challenge of what old D20 OSR gaming is, right? So it's harder when you only have 2. And this is why it's wise to have retainers, right? Retainers are level 0 fighters. They're garbed in no armor, maybe leather armor if we buy it for them, and a short sword or a dagger, but at least there's bodies. And retainers are level 0 fighters. And it's just one of those things we're going to have to start doing in Joth. We're going to have to make an effort to hire torchbearers and retainers, even if we just split a percentage of gains with them. We've got to do more. So Eloy and I should not have set foot out of Bricket Bottoms without obtaining a couple of retainers, right? At least 2, right? 2 or 3. And that at least would have given us gumption. Because again, most people, unless it's a Texas Ranger movie where the Texas Ranger by him lonesome goes out and takes on the cartel, right? This isn't the Texas Ranger. Yeah, we're not Texas Rangers, right? We are not an army of 1. We're not even an army of 6, right? We are a party of 6. But holy cow, a legendary session, and I'm thrilled that I was there to see it. It's unbelievable. So between Lauren's epic shot to put the bugbear to rest at the end of a session 2 or 3 sessions ago, which was legend, right? Again, the dice dictate legend. They dictate heroics. Actions dictate heroics, right? I mean, I can dive into the fray to help a friend knowing I may die. That's a heroic action. But the dice dictate legend, right? And I could see him dodging the giant. I mean, every giant roll and he'd miss because you're holding your breath, because we all know that giant's probably going to do some serious damage. And every time he dropped those dice and you would see a 9 or a 10, you could just see him deftly dodging. This is the thing I love about the D20 abstract combat. It's abstract. It's not necessarily wounds. It's fatigue. It's the overall fight. He came out of a fight with a giant unscathed for 4 rounds, unscathed. Which means he wasn't even sweating, right? I mean, he was just like, what? And cut, yeah, and then he was just slicing. He was wearing out, and again, you can see. So hit points, you don't have to see is him actually damaging it. He's wearing it out, right? You can imagine it's chasing him around the opening, around the cabin, and it's swinging, and it's tired, and it's trying to hit him. And so some of it can be sword damages, and it can be actual damage. Some of it is just, again, the hit point bubble is the abstract concept of the entire event. It can be fatigue, it can be injury, it can be wounds, it doesn't have to be, oh, I cut off a finger, oh, I cut off a toe. And you know, even my dwarf, because it's abstract, is just wearing him out by making it move its foot around so I don't crush its feet, its toes. You know? I don't actually hit it, right? And I can see it all in my head. I don't need it defined as a simulator. I don't need it to tell me I have done this exact thing. All of it, right? The imagination tells us what this crazy scene looked like. And that's it. We close the curtains as we come out of the East Woods in the general direction of Longfane Camp, and we see in the distance that is where to go. As we come out of the woods with our captive, George says, just that way, just a few miles. And curtains close as we're gonna drag the Kraken to I still can't believe it happened. It's like I told my wife, well, I don't know if we're gonna have everybody, but there's no way we're gonna find the guy, probably, but most likely Martin and all of us will die in some horrendous East Woods, you know, and I'll lose my third level thief, you know, who I'm really getting to dig, you know, I'm really digging Martin. It's like, okay, I'm finding my place with Martin, and I'm having great role play with George, John. And it's like, dude, I'm really liking Martin and George's pairing. And then of course I'm digging now Ungar with uh George has also just been a fantastic character to interplay with, John and as George. So Martin, again, I have this affinity now. You know, Martin feels for George. He wants to help George achieve this task. And there's now this kind of camaraderie and affinity there. So George has also just been this amazing character to kind of befriend and get to know. It's like, okay, he's not an annoying bard, you know, because I don't think people like bards. You know, he's not this annoying. It's this kind of I don't I can't describe it, but John is playing this George perfectly, and it's so much fun to engage with John as George. And this is why we do it, right? This is why we do it. It's so much fun. And of course, Eloy and I think both were still, you know, still going, are we doing this? I mean, are we actually going off into the woods after oh wait, there's rumors of a giant in these woods. Oh, okay, yeah, we're gonna. I think Illinois are like, what the hell are we doing? You know, I don't know. I don't know how Illinois felt. I mean, obviously, I was thinking, oh my God, we're not going to achieve anything. And to come out of this with the Kraken in tow, just it's it will go down as the most epic session of Joth I have ever seen. And two first level characters and George are going to bring back the Kraken. And we had to vanquish a giant to do it is just, it's nuts. It's nuts. And again, I got to thank Todd for another unbelievable session of sandbox, open world, old school essentials gaming. Again, the dice don't lie, right? Um, these are not tales we tell lightly. The dice dictate our fate. And when the dice dictate this kind of fate, it's fact, it's legend, and by God, I'm going to enjoy it because mostly we end up we end up dead. So, all right, everybody, I can't tell you enough how much I'm loving this. These are the best group of human beings. These are the greatest OSR games. And I am just having a second childhood. It is unbelievable. As Eloy and I were discussing before session, to be mature, you know, 50-year-old men, 50-plus-year-old men, coming back to the game we did when we were kids, but being mature, intelligent, educated, sophisticated, it takes this thing that was just a certain kind of gaming, and even though we might be still playing it, you know, as it's intended, there is another level of joy here that I never, ever, ever, ever thought, right? When your kids are just having fun playing a game with your buddies, it's like there's a level here that is so rewarding. It's so joyful. I can't get enough. I can't get enough. So thank you. I want to thank all of you, John and Eloy and Todd, for another amazing game. All right, everybody have a great, great week. Bye.